What if a client can't pay for therapy? And what if they have a skill that you could benefit from? Is it appropriate to swap therapy for the skill they have? In this video, we're looking at the ethics of bartering. Can you barter with clients? What are the best practices for this? Let's discuss it and see, can you barter? And if so, what are the pros and cons of doing this? But first, my name is Keegan. I have a master's degree in counseling and I'm a licensed professional counselor. I make videos like this to help you better understand counseling, psychology, and mental health. Before we get too far into things, let's define bartering. According to the American Counseling Association, or the ACA, bartering is accepting goods or services from clients in exchange for counseling services. An example of this might be a client who owns a business where they paint commercial buildings. And so in exchange for some therapy sessions, they agree to paint some of the rooms at your therapy office. Now, the first question that we need to answer is it even ethical to barter with clients at all? The short answer is yes, it is ethical, but know that this is a practice that is typically discouraged. Let's look at the ACA's Code of Ethics to help guide this discussion a bit. Code A.10.e says, counselors may barter only if the bartering does not result in exploitation or harm, if the client requests it, and if such arrangements are an accepted practice among professionals in the community. Counselors consider the cultural implications of bartering and discuss relevant concerns with clients and document such agreements in a clear written contract. But that's not the only code that applies here. So let's take a look at Code A.6.b. Counselors consider the risks and benefits of extending current counseling relationships beyond conventional parameters. Examples include attending a client's formal ceremonies, such as a wedding or commitment ceremony or graduation, purchasing a service or product provided by a client, accepting unrestricted bartering, and visiting a client's ill family member in the hospital. In extending these boundaries, counselors take appropriate professional precautions such as informed consent, consultation, supervision, and documentation to ensure that judgment is not impaired and no harm occurs. As you might be seeing, there are many considerations that need to be thought through when it comes to bartering with a client. Perhaps one of the most obvious is that it would change or shift the therapeutic relationship in a way because those boundaries have been extended. If we think about this from the therapist's perspective, what if you are then unhappy with the service that the client has provided in exchange for the sessions? If we extend the example of the client who is painting your office, what if they didn't do a great job with painting? Or what if they spilled paint and got it all over the floor, which then needed to be replaced? If you have to tell the client that you're unhappy with how they've painted, that could be a very awkward conversation and could really impact that therapeutic relationship. And if they've spilled the paint and destroyed carpet or furniture within the office, who's paying for that? Is that something that you'd have to cover? Is that a cost that they have to cover? These dynamics are something that we typically wouldn't have to worry about in a typical therapeutic relationship because we try to minimize any dual relationships that would occur. Not only that, but if these things are occurring, would you be able to enter those sessions for this client in a way that is non-judgmental, where you're not letting some of these other situations that might be happening with their service impact the care that you give them? Another factor to consider is, what if they don't perform the service that they said they would? What if they've had some sessions, but then they don't actually do any painting in the office like was agreed to? How's that handled? These are parts where having that contract may be helpful, as hopefully this would be outlined in that contract. But at the same time, this is just something that typically wouldn't have to be thought through in the same way if there wasn't this bartering that was occurring where there was an exchange for service and sessions. We can also look at things from the client's end. As we know, we're not always the right fit for every person. Typically, if we're meeting with somebody and they don't feel like we're the right fit, they can move on and find another therapist. In this case, though, it may not be that easy. If they're not feeling like you're the right fit, how will that be handled? Would you then be responsible for paying cash for the service that they're performing? Are they expected to use all of the sessions? Again, this is something we don't typically have to think about with the typical way therapeutic relationships are formed, but bartering adds a new complexity to it. With all that said, you might be thinking that there's no reason to ever barter with a client, as it just seems too complicated. However, there are actually reasons to consider bartering with a client, and so let's go over those now. But first, if you're enjoying this video and finding it helpful, please help me out by giving it a like and subscribing. One thing to recognize is that bartering might be more common in some cultures compared to others. Therefore, considering the cultural considerations with bartering is important, as these may support bartering or make it more likely for you to do it. Therefore, cultural considerations are something that we do need to think through when it comes to bartering. Another thing is to recognize that bartering might be a way for clients to get access to therapeutic services that they wouldn't otherwise be able to gain access to because of limited resources. So bartering might be a way for some clients to get therapy when they otherwise would not be able to. When it comes to bartering with a client, there are some specific things that we need to consider as well as some best practices. Let's take a look at those. First, only barter if the client asks. Don't bring this up yourself. Second, create a contract for the bartering and make sure that you and the client are both in agreement with it. Third, do not agree to bartering with the client if it could result in harm to them. Fourth, ensure that the bartering is not resulting in the exploitation of you or the client. Fifth, be sure to consider the cultural implications of bartering with the client. Sixth, consider consultation and supervision in the decision-making process when considering if you should or shouldn't barter with a client. Seventh, be sure to document the situation as well as your decision-making process for it. Those are some things to consider when you're thinking through whether or not to barter with a client. But what else would you want to consider when bartering with a client? That brings us to the end of this video. I hope that you found this information on bartering helpful. While you're here, make sure that you check out some of the other videos on my channel. Thank you so much for watching.